Week 5. So welcome to week 5.
Came up so fast.
I know. I
I
can't
know.
believe it's week 5 already. It's crazy.
But this is interesting because I've never written a PLAF. So to read this information and then kind of thinking back on the 3 years where I did have a co-teacher, I have to be honest, if they did this, it wasn't in my presence. So I've never, this whole situation has been an eye opener for me as to the amount of work that actually goes into keeping the IEP legal. Um, and as I was reading it, one of the things that kept coming out was the examples that you can pull from to build the IEPs. They said that you can use, uh, what is it, full individual evaluations, functional behavioral assessments, parent observations. I never knew that. Teacher observations, that I knew, IEP progress reports, the medical records, discipline records, attendance. So there was a lot of things that came up in that quote that I didn't realize could be used in a PLAF. And it opened my eyes because I only knew like things like Amira, if, with Wilson doing the WIST and the Wade, any kind of benchmark testing, writing samples, the traditional things that we gather throughout the course of a year. So I have to be, I was quite ignorant on the PLAF. So Angelica, my hat's off to you.
Yes, I write plaques all the time. When I first started, I didn't know. I never wrote one before, obviously. And then when I started, now it's just like an everyday thing. Not an everyday thing, but I have an IEP meeting like once a month, and now they're all coming up. So it's just something that I do now. Like it's just like routine. Like I look at it and I know how to write it. But it's all like things like, their weaknesses, their strengths, reading, math, and then things like daily living skills, if they're independent, if they have any behavior plans, and then you would put on the bottom like they have a BIP or they don't. But it's just something that I do all the time. But it is a lot. It's like a lot of work to write one.
Yeah, because the question was what data was used to write the present level PLAFs. And boy, George, was I like shocked when I saw the amount of stuff. And then I looked at week 5, writing a PLAF, and went, whoa, holy moly. So, um, same to you, Catherine, because you're also special ed. So, my hat's off to both of you.
Yes. So last year was my first year teaching. And then that's when I think I mentioned this before. I kind of got jumped into that co teaching placement, and I was the special education teacher. So the first time I ever had to write a PLAF, I had no idea what I was doing. I was like, oh my goodness, what am I supposed to put in here? How am I supposed to say it? Right? Because it's being shown to parents and read. So I really did resonate with, I think it was the first article. They talked a lot about how like the language should be very like clear, positive, like there shouldn't be anything left up to interpretation in it. And that helped me a lot. My mentor teacher would show me like give a strength and then phrase like any weaknesses as like, we're continuing future instruction on, or, blah, blah, blah has not yet mastered. So similar to how Angelica was saying, I feel like by the end of the year last year, I was like, okay, like now I know how to like do this. But even reading the articles, like you were saying, Jody, there were plenty of stuff they talked about that I was like, wow, I never included that in a
Mm-hmm.
plaque. And even on the parent side of things, I know there's a section of the IEPs for like parent concerns, but I don't ever, or like last year, I never reached out to my parents beforehand to be like, hey, like, how is he doing at home? Like, I can add a summary of that into my PLAF. It just wasn't something I thought of. But now reading it, I'm like, that's a great idea. Like, I need
Mm-hmm.
to do that going forward.
See, with
No,
my IEP meetings, like a lot of them were like Google Meet and stuff, and now they're becoming more in person. And then like the case managers, they're like the behaviorists is there, so we all meet in a room. So then at the end, we'll ask like the parents, are there any concerns at home that you want us to help you with? And that's why the behaviorist is there because she'll kind of like give them ideas and things like that. But I never thought to even add that into my class either.
yeah, I haven't seen any of this. I've been to IEP meetings because I have had co-teachers in the past, 3 different co-teachers. And I'll be honest with you, I even put it in the 4th week where, oh no, I'm sorry, I started to write my reflection for week 5. And except for seeing them take maybe a question out here and there, I've never even seen the amount of work that we've been doing in the week to week goals for the students. And so it starts to make me wonder, what is it that's taught at the bachelor degree level versus what's being taught at the master's degree level? And are people, my first time showing up, I'll say in third grade, I started 3 months in to finish a maternity leave for an ICR special ed teacher. And all I was told was just cross out some questions you think will be difficult and, oh, and go in here and put progress. And but there was nothing that really prepared me. And in light of now seeing the brevity of that this is a legal document and understanding it a few years down the line, I kind of feel like those 3 or 4 months that I was the ICR teacher was really an injustice to the students because I had no idea what I was doing and nobody took the time to explain it. And I
I
guess
honestly,
that's my biggest concern with public school system. Nobody tells you, they just throw you in.
mhm. I completely understand what you mean because last year, like I was mentioning, I wasn't special education certified. I was just kind of thrown into that role since there was availability and New Jersey allowed it because I would take classes at the same time. But there are so much, and I'm sure, Angelica, you especially understand this, there are so many pieces in IEPs and just within special education in general. I was like, this is a whole entire new world. Like everything I
Mhm.
learned in my undergraduate degree for elementary ed was not necessarily irrelevant, but there was just so much more like additional learning, even just the acronyms and understanding what everything means. So definitely my hat's off. It's very extremely difficult job. And I did feel a little bit like I wasn't servicing my students enough last year because of my lack of experience. So it does make me question a little bit that program that I was able to still do. I'm like, I guess they needed teachers, but
But I guess it goes back to because question two feeds into that and it says what data clearly supports, I guess supports the PLAF. And I have to be honest again, because I'd never really written one. Yes, I was for 3 to 4 months an ICR teacher, but I don't think that qualifies me, nor does it make me an expert that I was in that position for that amount of time. But I did find a quote that said the PLAF statement serves as the foundation from which all other components of the IEP will be built. So I didn't know that. I now do. And um, I had read them, obviously, because of being the gen ed teacher, but it was worded in ways that it was a lot of it was all of the testing the student had gone through with Woodcock Johnson and all of this other stuff. But there was, and maybe it's just whatever we're using or whoever wrote it um, was very vague in some of their comments. So I don't remember seeing a lot about their current performance. It was just more SMART goal type stuff, and that they'll do this 80% of the time, they'll do that 80% of the time, and then you go in and say whether they're doing it or not. I don't recall a lot of specific deficits in skills. So, like the student I'm working with right now, he definitely has a phonological deficit that's affecting his reading. And in writing week five's stuff, I've gone out of my way to put that in there. He is going through child study team. So it does say that he's struggling right now with phonics. And as we move into multisyllabic words, he's going to really have a hard time because he struggles with remembering short vowel sounds in words. And now with glued sounds, having all and am and an, it's really confusing him. So I plan on bringing all of this documentation that I've been keeping to our meeting that we're going to have on the 11th, I think, March 11th, because I want this to be added to whatever they're doing, because I'm not sure if this is failure on the part of people prior, but there is, again, so much goes into it. I want to make sure he's covered when he moves on to fourth grade. They have all the documentation.
Do you know for our discussion questions if we're supposed to each pick our own PLAF and answer those questions on? Are we picking one as a group? I wasn't sure when I read through that.
That's what I wasn't sure either. I was, because it says what data was used to rate the present level. Like it was all about, I don't know if it was about what we wrote or I was confused.
I
Yeah.
think it's the one that we chose for the first assignment.
Okay.
So
Gotcha.
that's what I'm basing it off of.
Okay. Gotcha. I was talking in general, so I'm like, I feel like I need to go more specific now. Yeah, but I guess piggybacking off of it, for like my specific PLAF, I have a student and his IEP, he's classified under other health impairment, but also specific learning disability. And I'm focusing more on that and his reading goal. So a lot of his present level is focused on academics, like their diagnostics that they take. He scores, my special education teacher that services him, they do a wide range of assessments constantly. So those are all in there. And they also talked about behavior as well. So it did connect a little bit to, I believe it was the second article. They talked about how it's not just academics that are in there, it's the functional performance piece too. It's everything else that's going on around. So I was glad that my PLAF was written pretty balanced with that.
Mhm. And with my plaque, I did, because my, in their goals and objectives, the IEP, like it says their goals and objectives, obviously. So it'll say, matching letters of their name, it'll identify letters of their name. So with mine, she's identifying the first three letters of her name by matching. And it's like we determine it by the level of prompting needed. Like that's what I put in her, like that's what I would put in her PLAP under reading because they don't do a reading program or a math, curriculum. So it would be, she needs prompting for this, this, and that, and things like that. And it also ties into the spotlight statement of the PLAF and why it's so important article that explains that PLAF must clearly describe what the subject can and cannot, the student can and cannot do at the time in measurable terms.
Because that would definitely determine the disability would determine the impact for grade level tasks. So
100%.
definitely.
Mhm.
Yeah, and one piece too that I feel like could even be a little bit more refined in my PLAF is, and I saw this a little bit last year. This year in this PLAF, a lot of the data is just um, written with like the score or whatever placement without being explained what that means. So it has him scoring, X amount on this one assessment, but I'm not sure, as the gen ed teacher, what specifically that assessment was looking at, what skill that's going to target. So that's definitely something I'm going to be more mindful of when I look at PLAFs more often, or if I end up in that role again, making sure that I'm understanding what that is. Because if I'm not as a teacher, I know parents probably aren't, and that must be very confusing on their part to read this huge document and have it almost sound foreign to them because again, a lot of acronyms, a lot of testing, a lot of words that may be unfamiliar, especially a lot of my parents last year were like non-English speakers. So there was a language barrier in itself in the IEP meeting, let alone with those higher vocabulary words that are unfamiliar towards them.
100%.
We had this ties in, I guess, to question 3, what assumptions may have been made without data. We had our IEPs were a mess. We had the year prior, that person got sent down to the kindergarten first grade, and we got the caseworker from kindergarten first grade up. And it felt like most of the school year was spent correcting IEPs because they were not filled out properly. Kids were in the wrong, I think I mentioned that to you. Kids were in the wrong placement. Kids who should have been ERI were in ICR. Kids who were LLD were in POR. So it was a nightmare. And one of the quotes out of one of our articles said that you can assume it's outdated, repeated, vague, inaccurate, or an incomplete PLAF, but when it's completely a mess, because whoever was writing it and getting it ready for the following year, because it's the anniversary, it's the annual review,
Mhm.
and they're just butchering it or whatever, that makes it even that much harder to put children in the least restrictive environment for them so that they're learning with the tools and the strategies and the modifications and accommodations for whatever their IEP says.
I agree. I'm going to piggyback off of that because when I was in the preschool, there was the PSC and then there was the EBA, and a lot of students were placed in the wrong, like whoever placed them was placing them in the wrong setting. Like there was kids who were behavioral that did not belong there. It belonged in a different school or were put in PSC when they clearly were EBA kids. And us as the teachers were like, why is this all messed up? Like, why are kids being put in the wrong placements? Because it's like a disservice to them because if they're PSC and they're ABA kids and they're put in a PSC with kids who are higher functioning and could, do more skills, they're going to fall behind.
Yeah, that happened to me a little bit last year with the goals in the IEP all the IEPs that I inherited. And it was a very interesting situation because the special education teacher before me, she had not worked there anymore. She had gotten like laid off or something. So she wasn't available to chat about what she meant by writing some of these things. And it seemed like there was an AI program that was used to word the goals or create the goals, which can be great when it's used as a tool. But in this situation, the goals that were written for these students were completely unrealistic because they were written by a computer, not by, the person working with them. So I totally understand what you mean by just having to clean up the IEPs because I felt like as soon as I got my annual reviews with those kids, then I could, set the goals or adjust the goals to be a bit more obtainable for them and in language that makes a bit, more sense and there's more clarity. And then I felt better. But in the beginning of the year, October's round was very rough trying to fix some IEPs with somebody who wasn't even available to confer with about them.
Last year was really rough with the confusing in the IEPs to begin with. And um, we had a class of 28 children made up of what was supposed to be POR and Gen Ed students, 29. Of that 29, 11 were IEPs. And then we shared an IEP student who was placed into ICR who should have been POR. And then we had a child that we shared with LLD who should have been in LLD. It was confusing. And just looking at, behaviors and all of those things, for the child who should have been in LLD, there was behavior issues, but none of that was in the IEP. So it was just more about, oh, the student showing growth, but there was nothing really there that showed how she was showing growth. It was more about accommodations. So was she really growing, or were the accommodations the reason she was showing growth? It was frustrating. And now I've come to realize after this week, we were really making things difficult and not being strategic and writing them accurately, or at least the case manager wasn't, not to throw the person under the bus, but it was a nightmare.
I'm
So if we're
surprised
frustrated, imagine what it's like for a child.
Exactly.
I'm surprised you were able to have 11 kids with an IEP. I don't know if that was my district cap, but last year, even in ICR, we couldn't have more than 8 students with an IEP.
You're not supposed to have, I think it's 8 to 10, and then you need a waiver. And we tend to seem to stack the rooms and get the waiver.
Mm.
Probably not the smartest way to do it, but that is what's being done.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully they're not doing that to you.
Well, yeah, a little bit. Virginia is a bit different with their special education. And I think I mentioned this earlier. It's done by minutes rather than subject. So I have students that are pulled out for like 10 minutes at a time or here and there. So I'm technically the students with IEPs, I'm their main reading and writing teacher, even though I am in a general education position this year. Then they do supplemental work with the special education teacher. But as far as delivering the curriculum, I'm the teacher who's responsible, which is a bit overwhelming since I have 45 kids in both my classes to teach. And especially when I have students on like a kindergarten and a first grade reading level, which I have about like six, maybe like seven of those kids that are that low, it's really tough and it's overwhelming.
Well, then it goes back to how the present level informs instruction and goal writing. And there was a really good quote. It said baseline data for the new proposed goals is also critical for measuring progress on the goals. And like I said prior, since I'd never really did much with the IEPs as far as, I'm sorry, the PLAFs, um, when I did do it, it was more like, oh, go in here at this time period, because 4 times a year you're supposed to go in and show whether they're progressing or they need support or whatever. So I got to do that once. So I can't even be um, a partial witness as to what was really going on because it was very limited. But coming to figure it out, what's shaping the instruction in my room is obviously what's shaping the IEPs for the students as well, where you have baseline, starting parts, starting points, small group intervention, accommodations, scaffolding for the different or various levels of students, making sure that goals are being targeted, and progress monitoring using the same type of data and baseline throughout, just to make sure that it's true growth and not a one-off thing, like I said, because of accommodations.
Yeah, I'm looking at my PLAF now, and it does directly connect to the IP goal that I'm focusing on. He took some like developmental spelling analysis, and he scored within Word for his spelling stage. And then they pulled out the specific word patterns that he struggled with, which were R-controlled vowels, common long vowels, and complex consonants and blends. And those are like the three pieces of his IP goal that I've been targeting each week. So kind of works out because there's 3 different activities we do. So I've been doing one with this, one with the other, and then one with the third, give or take which ones need more attention. So that is great that I'm able to see it like directly connect to the PLAF.
I agree. Mine does too with the letter identification. It like aligns perfectly with the plaque.
I filled in for one of the Wilson teachers. She had an emergency for 2 or 3 weeks. So I filled in for her with one of her small groups. And with those guys, I was able to see growth with them over, and usually 2 to 3 lessons a student if they're showing mastery and can do the 15 real words and 13 nonsense words to show 100% 86, can move on to the next sub step. So one of the little ones was she was second grader, about to have her IEP, and the teacher came and asked about a comment or what should be some goals for her in the PLAF for the year moving forward. And she was doing really well with CVC words. So it was more getting her used to glued sounds and double letters in words when they double. And so I got to see that side of it. It was neat to see that because I'm like, I just learned this.
I also thought it was interesting for this question. The IEP Spotlight article states that the weak present levels lead to weak or misaligned goals. So the clarity of the PLAF directly impacts instructional planning, which I 100% agree with.
Yeah, it's almost like a domino effect. Like if that foundation isn't there, like you don't know the problem specifically, how are you supposed to know how to solve it? So it definitely makes me reflect on last year and making sure like I was writing as clear as I could be. And even the collaboration piece too, I'll notice this year sometimes when a student is with me, they act or perform different when they're with the special education teacher. So it's so great that I have such an open communication with him, because then we're able to kind of see the student as a whole, and then we'll notice things like times of day or, class size that may like affect his behavior or academics. And I definitely feel like, I know you mentioned this a bit earlier, Jody, in like an ICR room where you're sharing students all the time. I wish I collaborated more with my general education teacher when writing my PLAF. I kind of just did that independently myself. And looking back, that would have been really great to have her input in the PLAF as well, not just in the meeting. So I'm glad that I get to share my input this year, and that's definitely something I'll be cognizant of going forward.
That is good. Good. I would have known what was going on if that were the case. So, I mean, I sat in one, and one of the parents was an advocate. She actually worked with a law firm that did advocating for students with special needs. And when it came time for her daughter's IEP, boy, she knew her stuff, and she was Johnny on the spot. And when people tried to give her the teacherese type, oh, she's doing great and blah, 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 it was like, no, that's not the case. I wanted, and she wanted like almost like clinical, like her she doesn't need occupational therapy. She's holding, all of those things. She wanted it very specific. And I just thought, wow, and she's my next door neighbor. So I, I didn't know what to say. I was like, wow, she's doing great. She can hold the pencil. I mean, she wrote better than some of the gen ed students. So she just wanted to make sure that if the IEP said it, her daughter was getting it, and that the progress was truly reflected across the board and not a one-off.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, we have 9 minutes before it turns off on us, so I'm going to pause it because it will just kick us out.
Very abrupt.
Unless there's something else. Does somebody have anything else they want to add?
I don't think so. I think I covered everything I wanted to talk about.
Okay.